down the rabbit hole of rock and roll's past, present, and future. It's Barstool Rockers with your hosts, Jim Finn and Dan Michaels.
Like we were talking, you don't have any recollection of the Rock 40 era, do you?
Well, I do now because you've refreshed my memory.
We shouldn't have talked about it off mic. And yeah, that was that era. It was like the late 80s, early 90s. It was a format that was tried for a while, and it brought us a lot of different things. I mean, it was kind of the bridge from top 40 to rock, and it's kind of where a lot of folks came in, and I just remember a lot of the music that Desmond Child wrote in that era was just, it's like glue. It sticks to you. Like Kane Roberts he was a guitar player famously, and then he came out from behind, the amps and came out with a song called Does Anybody Really Fall in Love Anymore? And Desmond had an album that was called Discipline, and it featured a song, Love on a Rooftop. Those songs just stuck with me and have stuck with me over the years.
Wouldn't that be the humble beginnings of crossover?
Yeah,
you
probably.
Think? Yeah.
But yeah, no Rock 40 was a thing for a while, but it just didn't, it was the effort to rock up the top 40, I guess, at one time. So.
And as we were discussing, Desmond Child basically wrote the Trash album for Alice Cooper.
Oh, for sure. How you doing, everybody, by the way? We're just sitting here chatting about our guest today, Mr. Desmond Child. He has been, well, I mean, in rockers, it's just been unreal. I mean, Aerosmith, he's written with Robin Beck. He was pretty much the tent poles for Michael Bolton for a very, very long time. Bon Jovi wrote a couple of their biggest hits. And one of my very favorite songs of theirs, Blood on Blood. That's a huge one to me. Cher, Cinderella. Mm-hmm. He wrote Wasted Generation on the Rockstar soundtrack.
And don't forget the song for Kiss.
Yes. the polarizing song for Kiss.
Tune, yes.
But yeah, the list of songs people he has written with just goes on and on and on, and we were very fortunate to have an opportunity to talk with him.
Good morning.
So Desmond Child Live, new album just out, and it covers a good chunk of your career, although to cover the entire Desmond Child career, we would probably need like a box set. So
or two,
or three, maybe. What was it like to revisit all of these hit songs that you created?
Well, I had originally had a group, Desmond Child and Rouge, in New York City in the 70s. And so I loved playing in these little clubs, and I found a club called Feinstein's 54 Below where we recorded this album, and I brought everybody from my life into it. And it was fun. It really was fun. And they're kind of like, because it was for a little club, like, stripped down versions and stuff. And I love singing. And so it's just part of the thing where it's like the trainer has to jump into the ring and fight the fight in order to learn how to teach other people, how to do it. So I jumped back in.
Have you ever stopped and considered the number of people you've worked with and the magnitude of material you have created together and just how many lives you touch by doing that?
Well, I think it's like billions.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think we added up that I'd sold 500 million actual records, and that's kind of more than any of the individual artists I've worked with, because they all went out and took my music to all corners of the world. And so now with streaming and all of that, that's like in the billions. And so it gives me a really great feeling, because I think if I had just stuck with being an artist, I would have been lucky to have one or two hits, and then that would have been it. But this way, I kept rolling, and my music has really helped a lot of people. We once got a letter from a dude that was thinking about killing himself, so he drives up to the bridge, he jumps out of the car, leaves the engine running, radio on, blasting, and he goes up and he's getting ready to jump, and Livin On A Prayer comes on. And he goes, oh, well, that's my favorite song. So he says, I want that to be the last song I hear. So he gets back in the car. By the time the chorus comes in at the end, the modulated chorus, he drives home.
Yeah.
So Bon Jovi saves lives.
The healing power of music. I want to go back. I want to go back to the beginning of the creation of Livin On A Prayer. Tell us about your memories on when that song was written and how it came about.
we had written, our first song was You Give Love a Bad Name, and it was several weeks before, and that was at Richie's parents' house where he still lived in New Jersey. And then we met in New York City, and I had borrowed an apartment that had a piano, an old, like, broken-down upright piano at Doug Schneider's apartment. And I hadn't thanked him yet for letting us use his apartment. And we wrote the song over 2 days, and John got it in his mind that he wanted to write a story song. So everybody brought their own story to the song, and my story was I had previously lived with a woman, Maria Vidal, and we were also co-founders of Desmond Child and Rouge, and she worked in a diner where they had singing waitresses, and her stage name was Gina Velvet. And so I was home in the little apartment writing songs, and so the story of Tommy and Gina, for me, is the story of me and Maria. And so that's how that began. And then ultimately, when we finished the song, John decided it was too melancholy, too sensitive to be on the record, that he had conceived to be much more harder-edged. And literally, half joking, half for real, Richie and I got on our hands and knees and begged him to at least cut it and see what happens. And, of course, the rest is history.
When I stop and think about the music you've written, and I've been studying it for a couple days here, I seem to lock into a period that I recall from radio being the Rock 40 test format era, when songs like, Kane Roberts' Does Anybody Really Fall in Love Anymore, and yours from Discipline, Love on a Rooftop. There was Soraya, Timeless Love, and just a slew of songs like that have stuck to me over the years. Is there a certain chord structure or lyrical structure that you go for that makes the songs adhere to a person?
I don't know. I think that I had studied with Bob Crew, who I say studied because he was my producer and we were co-writing for my solo career. But it ended up more like songwriting university. And we'd write 5 days a week during certain hours, like very structured. And I used to just sit and play chords and then kind of improvise, mumble around, hoping that those mumbles would sound like lyrics or something. And he wouldn't even start a song unless we had like a solid title. So therein lies the power of, using music to enhance the story of what the song is about. The lyrics tell the story, and then the music scores it like in a movie. And that's why I think that you feel the double power of that. And then when you cast the song properly, then you have the power of the star. And then all of those things align. And it's like you see a giant star in the sky that could be like 20 stars all aligned. And so all those things have to be in place for it to be a hit. So when lyrics and the melody goes with it to really help convey the emotion, that's what makes it stick.
Is that something you talk about? Because I know you've been working on an autobiography, Livin On A Prayer, Big Songs and Big Life, which is set for release next year. Is that something you talk about in the book, your songwriting process?
Well, the book, which I co-wrote with David Ritz, who's foremost music historian and authority on popular music, it was a very painful process. It's cinematic. It's rags to riches. It's the American dream. And I do talk about, how the things that happen in my life are reflected in my music. And then how I do talk a lot about the structure of how I write, but not in a kind of a textbook way. It's always in context with an emotional story. So I think that people will find it entertaining because it's really cinematic. But I also think that young people that are into music will kind of get strength from it and inspiration.
Well, Desmond, we know you're up against the clock, and we want to thank you for your time this morning. And I just hope that you keep this brilliance of yours going. And thank you for all the music over the years. And we wish you the very best of luck with the new album. and the book and
Thank
all
you.
projects
And
going forward.
I'm asking y'all to follow me at on Instagram, Desmond.child, because I'm hooked on Instagram. And, like, my family's always yelling at me to get out of that little corner where I'm, like, going crazy, answering questions and all that. But I really appreciate your interest in me and the opportunity to tell my story.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Desmond. Take care.
I was telling my girlfriend, he is like the Stephen Hawking of songwriters. He just has a brilliant mind when it comes to doing this.
For a lot of these artists, Aerosmith, Kiss, Alice Cooper, I believe that Desmond Child was brought in to resuscitate careers.
You don't think Alice would have?
On his own?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. But at that point, coming on the heels of what was, we'll just say, a little bit of a down period for him.
Okay.
I think it has less to do with Alice Cooper. It has less to do with Aerosmith. It has less to do with many of these artists than it did at that point. Follow with me here. The record company, because the record companies wanted hits.
The Desmond sound.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you think it was more of a trend issue at that point in time? We all know that record companies are famous for, oh, that's working. Oh, hell, let's make 90 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, it's huge, I think. I mean, it's never been really a secret. Back in the 50s, back in the 60s, the pattern was always the same. And they famously just push people, no, you're going to do this on this album. People may think, oh, that artist was so creative, so with the time. No, the record companies a lot of times were pushing people. And that's a cool thing about today, in that with independent releases, it's not a factor anymore.
There's a great story that Howard Kalin has told of the Turtles, Flo and Eddie, Mark Volman, Howard Kalin. There's a great story he has told about when Happy Together became such a massive hit. And the record execs came in and said, well, we got to have a follow-up to Happy Together, and it's got to sell as much as Happy Together sold. So Howard, I believe, went to his hotel room and came up with Eleanor, which followed the same basic structure, but in his mind was completely different than the story he was telling in Happy Together. So, yeah, I think for those artists, it's got to be difficult when you have so much pressure coming from the suits that want you to perform as well as you did. I mean, think about all of the bands.
It's the dancing chicken on the stove.
Exactly. If you think about
They're turning up the flames and they expect you to dance and do it just like you did the last time.
Yep.
Wow. That's the music business, ladies and gentlemen. There's Records 101. And in Alice Cooper's words, Desmond Child is a slave driving sluts. Gene Simmons, of course, has a much more eloquent way of putting it. Desmond is the perfect songwriter. Neither styles in music nor trends and fads have ever held him back from doing what he does best, which is craft a song like nobody else can. I have to honestly say he has completely floored me with his songwriting craftsmanship. I admire him and applaud him.
That's what Gene had to say?
That's what Gene said. Steven Tyler, though, Desmond's a chameleon. The first time we met, we wrote Angel in about an hour and 45 minutes. And I'm not bullshitting. The guy's a genius.
Way to go, Steven.
If you enjoy what we do on this podcast, you can check it out all you want. It's at barstoolrockers.com. You can also find us on, wherever you found us today. We're also on Spotify. We are on the Apple Podcast platform, of course, LinkedIn, all those fancy podcasting platforms, and, of course, the iHeartRadio app. We do want to thank Joe Kelly and our very, very dear friend Anastasia Wisniewski for the music she produced for us for this show, and we want to thank you for listening today.
Yogurt the wise. Yogurt the all-powerful.
Yogurt the magnificent. Please, don't make a fuss. I'm just plain yogurt.